And Corla, I may not take the full amount of the time, but I want to repeat what I said in Cabinet yesterday. If that's not a problem, Count Corla, if we don't run into constitutional difficulties in that regard. Because I wanted to, what I said there, I said the exact same thing, similar, that this government is working well. That this government in the last month, not only working well in terms of how we managed the pandemic, and listen, the mistakes we all admit and terrible losses, but by any international yardstick, we've managed the pandemic as a people, we've managed as well as a country, and government is part of that. But now we have to come out of the pandemic, we have to recover from that. And I think what's happened in the last month is a sign of a government that really is well equipped and well up for that task. In the housing for all strategy, critical. In the NDP plan, setting out the future of investment for the next 10 years. Yesterday in the budget, and I believe we'll do further work in this series of events which we've planned around the recovery and lifting our country and our economy, in the climate action plan which comes in 2 weeks' time or so. And yesterday is an important part of that. Because an important part of being able to do all this is having a sound economy. And if I could, the centre of the sound economy is our ability now to invest in capital, in infrastructure, in the future, in housing, in climate and in health particularly, but also obviously in our schools, our water infrastructure and all the other elements. But those three in particular is what our people need now. They need the housing built. We need to prepare for climate and to protect against it. And we heard the stories Deputy Alan Kelly retold this morning of young people in critical condition in our health system. But to solve that, we need to invest in capital. And we need to create the economic conditions to get that right. There was one comment, I was looking for commentary on the budget or seeing who said what. And there was what was called on their website a flash press release from the Fiscal Advisory Council. Now, the Fiscal Advisory Council wouldn't be known for flash anything. Prudence is their middle name. But then I'm glad that Minister Paschal Donoghue is here, because I think what they say very much gives confidence to what he and Minister Michael McGrath did yesterday. What they pointed up was a really key economic truth, that our economy is starting to lift. Our numbers are far better than even we thought they would be in the summer. But what we're doing is actually using that money to help us on the capital side. Because what they said is critical, we're adhering to the spending rule that was set out in the summer economic statement. That we would on average, I think it is, Paschal, is at 5% increase in current spending into the medium term. Thinking medium term, and not just this year, next year, but into the next 5 and 10 years. That trajectory of spending on the current side will give us the stability to be able to keep interest rates low and manage our debt so we can invest on the capital side. What they said this morning was that by keeping to the rule as reserves surprised on the upside, the economy, as a reserve surprise on the upside, the government has the economy on a more prudent path that will reduce borrowing and the debt ratio in the years ahead. Now that's important because we're facing into an uncertain world where inflation is starting to rise, where quantitative easing at some point is going to be tapered off, and probably in 23 or 24, in that sort of time frame, we want the rest of the world to look at Ireland and say that's a place where you can still lend to, particularly for capital projects. We will be borrowing for capital, not for current. In your speech yesterday, Paschal, was the key line. And I think that's right. And the scale of borrowing on capital is limited not in a sense by ambition, but it's the ability for us to train the workers and get the resources in place. I don't see any restriction on that. If it's value for money and those investments in housing and climate and health give a good return, which they will, the only restraint or restriction on us is the internal supply lines and chains so that we don't overheat, so that we get good value money, and so that we deliver good quality projects for our people. So having said that broad outline of sense, the big, in my mind, economic picture here is is we borrow and we spend on capital, and we manage our current side to allow us to do that, to keep interest rates low and get the balance in the economy right. The climate transition is going to require such a huge capital change. We have to change our entire capital stock in transport, energy, agriculture, industry. This is a 10, 20, 30-year project of capital investment of a scale beyond compare. And that's why we have to make sure we have the capability on the capital side by managing our current spending, which is what we've done in the budget yesterday. I'm going to concentrate on some of the elements, if I can, within my own Green Party elements, because Taoiseach and Taoiseach have set out a very much wider picture. I hope they won't mind if I focus on some, what I see are the green elements. Proud of our party in delivering again this year. On the transport side, and the capital side in my own area, we're going to still be spending on roads. There's 1.4 billion or so in total, huge amounts of money. That's going to start to reduce, though. And the reason it'll start to reduce is because the number of public transport projects is starting to rise dramatically. As we say yes to Metro, and as we say yes to Dart Plus, and as we say yes to Bus Connects, in Cork, Dublin, Cork, Galway, Waterford, Limerick, as well as Dublin, we've a huge capital spend requirement in the public transport side. And even though we have a massive budget, 35 billion over this decade, even that, we could actually, if we were to build all the projects, we'd need to double that budget. And we don't have, and we don't probably have the building capacity to spend 70 billion in transport. But we will spend 35, and we need to spend it well. And that will see the roads budget decline, and the public transport budget and active travel budget increase, so we achieve our 2-to-1 ratio. We start, though, on the public transport side. We're starting already 165 electric buses next year, 81 new buses around the country, rural buses, 41 new railway carriages that will fit into existing services, so we can increase capacity straight away. We don't have to wait for the Dart Plus and all the other Cork Metropolitan, Limerick Metropolitan rail services that will take time to get through planning and to build. We're also investing straight away in walking and cycling. That's critical. Hope to bring into legislation in this Dáil Cancor in the coming weeks our new road traffic miscellaneous provision bill. There'll be critical parts of that which will allow us to overcome some of the legal challenges we're seeing in terms of being able to spend and actually get that money out. I look forward to bringing that into the House. In the climate side, retrofitting is key, retrofitting is central, and the great benefit from it is that it improves people's health, it protects against fuel poverty, it's very rich in creating employment, it's a quality of life measure as well as a climate measure. We were delayed because of COVID last year, couldn't go into someone's house in the middle of a pandemic, first 5 years were gone, so we're going to have to ramp up now. What Michael McGrath said yesterday is absolutely right. What we're doing, this is a 10-year ramping up, we're only at the start. 85 million a year, Mr. Darrell Bryan will be spending on social houses for retrofitting. Social justice, ecological justice go hands in hand. We'll be spending 109 million in the warmer homes, where we cover the entire cost of people who can't afford the sort of transition that needs to be done. Introducing huge new resources both in my department and SEAI, and also now new loan schemes, so that people can actually get a loan scheme that's a fraction of the current interest rate cost, so that the private sector also plays its part, so people who can afford it can actually afford to make the retrofit possible. And the real attractive thing about this project is that wall of money that we've saved over the last 2 to 3 years, if we can direct as much of it as possible into this, it's the best investment. It's the best investment protection against the international fossil fuel high price crisis that we are in. There's a whole range of other ways that we can help make this transition happen, in rewetting our bogs, in carrying on and drilling down and going further in the just transitions investments we've made in the Midlands and elsewhere, in providing grants and EV supports for EVs, including VRT relief, I think it's about 82 million euros. It's not small to make this transition in this climate change space we need to make. And more than anything else, in the 35,000 green skills apprenticeship positions that are now being established and set up and getting going, because that's the biggest constraint. The biggest risk to us not being able to spend this money is we don't have the workers. And so it's that huge investment in our third level, in our apprentice scheme, is going to be key. And the message to our young people, and I think they absolutely get this, is that this is the future. This is where the money is going to be for the next 3 decades. This is a project that gives you real pride and status, protecting your and your friends' and children's own children's future. The current side, when I say this about the capital is key, the capital is key in housing, in health, in education, in water, in all the different areas, and we don't have time to go into the detail of them. It's not to say the current spending isn't important, and we don't obviously have to protect the cost of living, our people from the cost of living increases that are happening. But if I look through the budget yesterday, as I said, I'm proud of our parties. Like just taking examples in each of the ministers where we have particular responsibility. In my own area, I was very pleased to be able to listen to what the Corn and Oak said. They came to us and said, this is the National Representative Council for Young People, and said, best thing you could do is a 50% reduction in the travel card for those under 24. There was a gap there that they noticed. If you're under 18, you get a travel card, 50% reduction. But if you're a worker or a student, third-level student, you don't. You get 25% reduction if you're a third-level student. But they came with the proposal, and we said yes. We go for 50% reduction. Practical measure. It takes us time to introduce it. You can't even get the chips at the moment, such as the supply chain chaos that the world is in. But we will introduce it and look to go further then. My colleague Roderick O'Gorman, that measure to recognise the childcare workers and to pay them properly, and in that way to avoid a price increase. I heard David Cullinan the other day, and I listened with attention on the radio about, childcare costs and so on. I don't know, David, you were saying, if I heard you right, about 160, 170 million, and we could drop the cost of childcare by 2/3. Maybe if I'm misquoting you, I apologise, but that's what I heard on the radio. I'm not so sure if that's possible, because when we looked at it and we put all the similar sort of money in, we ended up with the outcome that we've done in the budget. But I think it's the right outcome, because looking after a child is an important job. We all know that. And paying for it properly is the first thing in getting it right, in my mind. So that decision to put the money there, I think, was the right decision. Stand up to it. I stand up for it and believe it was the right call. In the arts, while it's small in terms of the overall budgetary figures, the 25 million that Catherine Martin is going to put into Universal Basic Scheme for Artists is of huge consequences and significance, because it recognises that we have to measure sometimes progress, not just always in economic, monetary, but in this creative, cultural side. That'll be, I think, akin to what Charlie Hoy did years ago. Is that he's the person who introduced the tax-free for artists, or even, it's some of those symbolic things which are really important to say. We value the artists in our society. We give them flexibility and capability to do their work in a way that really actually works for them. You're working in a theatre, you're not working all the time. So having a basic income to come in and come out and be flexible, I think that trial is going to be hugely significant. Lastly, I was asked in my press conference yesterday, what about biodiversity? This morning, Malcolm Noonan replied, we've increased the funding for National Parks and Wildlife Service by 64% since he's been in office, up to 47 million next year. We've increased the spending on heritage by 36% right across the country. That's really important. Talking to Darragh O'Brien last night, an example up in his own constituency, a small grant, £5,000, turned around an old churchyard. Greater sense of community. People, there's lots of small things like that make a difference. Pippa Hackett this morning is announcing €21 million additional spending in organics. And we've doubled, as we said in the programme for government commitment, support for animal welfare organisations. That's important to the people who vote for our party. Joe O'Brien, it's not just social welfare increases went through in the protection against the carbon tax rise, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it was also the investment in payments, increased payments for lone parents, and school meals, and back-to-school allowances. And yes, we need to do more. And for those on the left who would say, and we're from the left. Yeah. And part of that is standing up for taxation, because that spending rule is a net rule. If we want to increase current spending further, yes, absolutely. And you fund it with taxation. Lastly, and before I come back to that, my colleague Oisin Smith, he's got a 100 million budget for the circular economy, which is critical to where our country goes next. He's $250 million that we have to deliver the national broadband. It was delayed by COVID, but we're going to deliver that. And come back, if I can, then, to this critical issue, tax or not. Yeah, we do have to raise tax. We can't do everything from borrowing. We can do the capital from borrowing, but the current we have to do it by raising tax. I believe the carbon tax has been the right thing to do. Not just on the climate side, where it's critical, among a whole range of different tools, but also because it's progressive. For the second year in a row, we produced a budget which shows that graph that those on the lowest decile quartiles, particularly the last 4, benefit most. And that's coming from carbon tax revenue recycled to the people. 9.5 billion we'll raise in it in the next 9 years. 3 billion will go to social protection, 5 billion to the retrofitting, and most of that will go to social protection too, because it'll be targeted at those in lower incomes, and 1.5 again social protection, because it'll go to a lot of small farmers. So our carbon tax revenue is going straight back to the people. It's not going into the wider budget. It doesn't help the overall economics, but it helps social progressivity. It's actually a solution to the energy price rise crisis that's out there at the moment, because the international fossil fuel prices are going up. The only protection against that, real long-term protection, best protection, is to reduce our dependence on those fuels, is to actually improve the efficiency of the homes and get health benefits and other benefits with it. And that's what our carbon tax does. Where is the alternative? Where does that 9 billion come to give to our poorest people? And also to allow us to meet our targets. Where is the money going to come for the retrofitting, that 5 billion, if it doesn't come from that? It's progressive. As is the zoned land tax. That's significant change yesterday. Hugely. So I heard some commenters saying, oh, but it's only 3% versus 7% of the vacant sites, not understanding the scale of the measure that was being introduced. Is it 8 or 10,000 hectares of land? 8,000 hectares of zoned land, which is sitting there at the moment, with land hoarding being the biggest curse, the biggest cause of the housing crisis that we're in. And at last we have the measure. At last we're delivering what we've been talking about for decades in our party, about a zoned land tax, so that it's not the landowners are dictating and determining housing policy. It's public good. It's not a revenue-raising measure. It won't raise a lot, but the signal it gives, the heat it will take out of the land speculation, the changes it will make to give the powers for local government to actually start making sure that we have zoning that actually means something. We're not just massively over-zoned and nothing happening on land, as some landowner just decides, well, I'm not going to go that, I'll come back in 10 years' time, I'll wait for the land values to rise, and then I might do something with it. Not anymore, because from now, 3% on zoned land, the value will be high, and we all know that those speculators are not going to sit and just pay that charge tax without an income stream to cover it on the other side. It's those measures. If we want to increase, then go further on the social welfare measures, well, then we do have to raise tax. We are from the left because we believe in property tax. And that sort of zoned land tax as a way of meeting our needs. And that's what this budget does. But more than anything else, it gives us a chance to avoid what's been the curse of this country for so long, is this mad cyclical up and down, boom and bust. By getting our current right and increasing it if we increase taxes, and giving us the room then to really expand, to go massive on building homes, building healthcare, and building climate resolutions for our country. Thank you.